I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless, maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe we are all self-helpless.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Self-Helpless. I'm Delanie Fischer, and today I'm chatting with Stephanie Edwards, who is a part of our summer series called Subscriber Stories, where our community has been writing in to share something about themselves, and we've been able to feature a lot of you on the podcast to tell your stories this summer. So today, Stephanie is sharing about her experience with compounded grief, where you experience a series of losses in a short period of time, which obviously can be especially difficult to cope with due to the compounding effect. So Stephanie's mother passed away due to cancer. And then the night before her mother's celebration of life, she found out that her brother had died of an overdose and that his date of death was actually the same exact day of her mother's. So she lost two loved ones in the same day. And then a lot of other changes and stressors happened within a matter of weeks around this. Life circumstances with her son and her daughter, the wedding she was planning, the venue called and canceled on her. Any isolated one of these things would be stressful or take an adjustment period of some kind, but it was just this pile on experience because of what she was already going through. And Stephanie shared with us that she basically had a nervous breakdown because who wouldn't? And took a medical leave from work, and she is sharing all kinds of details about this time in her life with us, which was only a couple years back. So we talk about what her grieving process has been like, what's helped her cope, the logistics of her day to day through this, some of the last moments she shared with her mom, how she handled telling people at her mother's ceremony that her brother had also passed away because they were asking where he was. I mean, just things that you don't think you'll ever need to figure out or do. What her transition back to work was like, and just how all of this has changed her perspective and her approach to life. So here's my chat with Stephanie. It sounds like you went through a lot of loss and unexpected events in a very short amount of time. Would you be able to list some of those things that you shared with us, and then we can get into more detail about, how
Sure.
you're coping with everything and all that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess sort of the executive summary
Yeah,
would be
exactly.
in October of 2022. I lost my mom to cancer. And then the night before my mom's funeral, we found out my brother passed away.
Oh my gosh.
And ironically so, his legal date of death turned out to be the same date as my mom's passing.
Oh
Two, like,
my gosh.
yeah, completely like not related whatsoever. And I can talk more about that. Yeah, and then we had her funeral here, and then we actually had to go out to BC for my brother on the same day that she passed away. My son was also being exited from a hockey team in the United States. I'm from Canada, and he had nowhere to
Oh
go.
my
2 days
gosh.
later, my daughter moved out with her boyfriend. 2 weeks later, the wedding we were planning in Mexico, the resort phoned us and canceled. And, in the midst of all this, I'm trying to continue sort of working and helping everyone around me cope. And then we had Christmas, and that was, dare I say, kind of can I swear? It was a shit
Oh,
show.
yes, yes. Go for it. No censorship here. Say what you feel.
Trying to help my dad cope and the kids and my fiance at the time. Like there was just so much going on, and the details of like what's going to happen with this wedding. We had 65 people booked to go. Trying to deal with just grief in general and helping my son get kind of back on track and still trying to work and manage Christmas and all these other things. And by the end of January, I was fried.
Oh
And
my
I
gosh.
did have to go. I did take a medical leave from work for about 3 months. I just physically like the whole stress of everything. Just I had like a physical nervous breakdown, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh. I mean, I would assume so.
Yeah.
It's so much grief and loss and unknown all at once. A lot of people experience loss spread out over many years worth of time. So what
Yeah.
was that experience like for you?
Honestly, it's like when people talk about that fight or flight, kind of reaction to things that are happening to them.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that. I felt that freeze state. Like I was just sort of like in this consistent state of shock and like consistent state of like high adrenaline. Like I'm just trying to essentially put one foot in front of the other and make sure, like, it sounds so like non-emotional, but I was literally just trying to keep the wheels in motion because there was just so much going on that I didn't know how else to handle it.
Right.
Like, I think part of the shock that I was really having trouble reconciling with was my mom passing away from cancer, but it wasn't even cancer. In Canada, we have a program called MAID, which is medical assistance in dying. And
Mm.
once you have a terminal prognosis and there's other requirements to meet, you can actually sign off and request that to take place,
Oh,
which my
okay.
mom had chosen to do. We fully respected that decision. We were there for it.
Wow.
Definitely makes sort of like, especially like her cancer was such an aggressive um, like diagnosis. I guess she was given such a short period of time to live, and chemo was like unlikely to help. She didn't want to suffer, didn't want us to suffer. So even though you support that, it's still, I don't know, it's still hard to kind of like understand. But then
Yeah.
to understand also too that when my brother, finding out about my brother, learning that he had had an overdose from fentanyl
Mm.
and had been dead in a hotel room for 3 weeks before he was found. So, like, you find that out the night before your mom's celebration of life, and then to go to the celebration of life, and then people say, "Oh, like, where's your brother?
Oh my God.
Like, why isn't he here?" This, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's like, what do you say? So, of
Right.
course, like, I'm doing this eulogy for my mom, and I end up deciding that um, I'm going to say it within the eulogy because a lot of my brother's sort of childhood friends had come to the funeral because they knew my mom and knew the family. And he had been out in BC for a number of years. So I think a lot of his friends were hoping to see him at the funeral.
Wow.
So there's like this weird dynamic that I'm trying to navigate. And sort of like in a quick decision, I was like, you know what? I can't pretend and then just be like, oh, he didn't come to his
Right.
own mother's. Like, you can't do that. So I said it in my eulogy that, we like learned last night that this was the fate of my brother. And like, this was so out of like a drama show where it's like this audible gasp throughout the room, like, and like, not that you're trying to do that on purpose, but it was sort of like just a kick to the stomach because, everyone's there for your mom and yet you're now having to deliver sort of a double whammy. So like trying to reconcile that on an emotional level, like was something I could not do at that time. Right. Like we then were on the
Yeah.
phone with like the coroner out there to like get more information. Like you're just like, this is the shit out of a TV show.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it was, after living for the next 2, 3 months in such a high level of like adrenaline and cortisol to manage everything, my body, like the nerves in my system just said, no, you need to now take the time to emotionally process all of this.
Right.
So I'm fortunate that, like, I could take that opportunity to step back and be able to start processing it on an emotional level and not just intellectually, like, this is what's happened to me. Now it's, I have to let the emotions go through my body, which is still, even to this day, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that your body just stopped
Yeah.
going into survival mode of just trying to survive the day. For this next question, of course, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and it's also okay if you're not, do you think that the death of your brother was connected to your brother grieving the passing of your mom? Do you feel like they were connected?
So I don't actually know if he knew that my mom was passing away that day.
Oh,
And the reason
wow.
for that is I'll kind of backtrack fairly quick. So my brother had moved out to BC at Christmas time of 2020. He had been struggling with addiction for years and years, had gone through a long period of, being clean and sober, kind of falling off, went to rehab a couple times, and decided that moving out there would be a better option to try and maintain his sobriety, which obviously didn't work. So we had sort of patchy communication with him for those couple of years. Like he would check in every once in a while, but then he would lose a phone or not have a phone because he couldn't pay the bill or anything. So when my mom initially got her diagnosis, she reached out to him to say, like, I do have cancer. I don't know what's happening with treatment. And she didn't tell him at that time that she was going to utilize MAID.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that was like July when she first got her diagnosis. And then leading up to the day that she was going to pass, we were then having the conversation around trying to get in touch with him, and we couldn't.
Wow.
So she then, kind of makes peace with this, that like, I won't get to say goodbye to him. She passes. And then with the only phone number that I had for him, was trying to text and phone. And I'd reached out to some of his friends, like on Facebook or other means that I could get a hold of them to say, like, does anyone know how to get a hold of him? Nothing. Like, no one could. And then once we heard from the police about his passing, and I spoke to the coroner to find out, because he said, oh, so this is how they explained it. He had checked into a motel middle of October. So it was a couple days before my mom passed. And he had paid for a month. There's some like motels out in BC that like you can do a bit like longer term stays, paid
Right.
cash. And then they have found video footage of him on that same day. And that's the last video footage they had of him, was the same day my mom passed away. And so the coroner explained to me, because that's the last legal date he was ever seen, that is the date we have to use for his date of death. And
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
can I appeal this? Because this is too creepy. I can't handle them having the same date. He
Yeah.
said, no, unfortunately, that's the rule.
Things that you don't think you ever have to consider or think about or know about. You mentioned that you were able to, take a leave from work and kind of start to try to process this. What did your day to day look like? Anything that you can share about that period of time?
So that period of time, not only was I obviously like an emotional basket case, but like physically, all of this, kind of trauma had built
Hmm.
up physically. So I was having awful nerve pain in my legs. My lower back was basically, it took me 45 minutes to crawl to the bathroom one night. Like
Oh
that's
my
how,
God.
like physically, my body was just like seized up from everything. So during that time, I spent a lot of time with like ice packs, hot baths, listening to podcasts such as yours. And I listened to We Can Do Hard Things a lot as well with Glennon Doyle and her
Hmm.
group. Um, Sometimes fun ones, because like sometimes when you get so into sort of this serious part of healing, you
Yeah.
can lose sight of sometimes the fact that humor can also be a way to heal. So I'd like listen to funnier ones like Smartless with, Jason Bateman and those guys, and, hanging out with friends, a lot of therapy, hanging out with my dog and cat, stuff like that, just to try and be as not insulated, but just as calm and as like quiet as I could handle.
Yeah.
Obviously physiotherapy and stuff like that for the physical aspects where I needed that extra help. But, it was nice just to be able to have quiet space, even though I know most of us don't like quiet. That's like the
Right.
last thing we want to handle. But it allowed for a lot of crying and a lot of just release of emotion. My fiance was amazing at that time too. He was just like a solid rock for me. And even my kids, even though they were trying to deal with it too, there was just a nice sort of grace period that I could just be how I needed to be. And
Yeah.
that I think made a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember how long it took you personally to start to feel like you were functioning a little bit maybe better in your day to day, in the sense of, okay, there maybe is starting to be a peak at a new normal for yourself? What was that like, and what was that timeline, if you remember?
Interesting. Yeah, like I went back to work probably too soon, because I feel like when you're talking about grief, and I mean, grief is a weird thing. I think anyone who's experienced grief, whether it's the loss of a pet, family member, friend, it comes in waves. Sometimes it just hits
Mhm.
you. You hear a song and you're just like, "Eh,"
Yep.
right? Other times, you just feel like, hey, I've got this. I know for me that grieving or trying to process really created a very small window of tolerance. And so that window of tolerance could be like, I just didn't have the patience to deal with people or crappy perspectives. Like
Mm.
I was like, if someone was complaining about the tater tots at the store not being good, I'm like, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
I
Right.
can't handle. Like that's the dumbest thing ever.
Right.
I think part of my healing was just reestablishing a level of perspective that actually means something now, right? Like we all joke about first world problems,
Mhm.
and it's easy to get caught up in it. We live in a world where instant gratification is important and social media and all these things, but sort of to keep perspective was a really good basis place for me to start. And I think once I started to feel my window of tolerance opening again, that I could be in a position to hear someone complain about their stuff and not just
Right.
like want to like rage on them, that I could hold
Yes.
space for other people again, if that
That
makes sense.
that totally makes sense. What do you think it was that helped you open up that capacity?
Ultimately time is a big one.
Yeah.
Um, but I think for me, a lot of it was really to be able to kind of reconnect with myself, turning inwards a bit more and to say, like, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to please other people. I don't have to go to the gym every day. I don't have to do anything for anything external, and giving
Yeah.
myself the permission to just say, fuck it all.
Mhm.
And if someone, and maybe part of it is it's just like, I don't have the patience to take other people's crap.
Yeah.
So it was like, just really working hard to remember that if I want to go for a walk, if I just want to look at the wall, if I want to gorge on Netflix for a night, and just like really giving myself just undeniable permission to just be like, every day, how do I feel? What do I want out of this day? Or what do I need out of this day? So that's what I mean by kind of turning inwards, is just to really like talk to yourself. Sometimes like I have to look at myself even now and say, like, you have been through an incredibly difficult couple years.
Yeah.
So like if I'm having a bad day, it's like, shut up, Stephanie, give yourself some grace. You're doing awesome, right? And just not to be so hard on my own self.
Right.
It's okay, just chill.
Yeah. Is there anything about you that you feel like is changed permanently by this experience, whether it's perspective on life, work, relationships?
For sure. I mean, I think grief in itself changes you. Like you read those or see those images where they talk about grief, and people say that grief, that ball of grief gets smaller over time. But the
Mm,
reality is you just learn to function around it because the grief itself doesn't go away.
right.
So you just learned how to increase your ability around it. So I think my own level of compassion for people around me has increased. I met someone for the first time a couple weeks ago, and they told me a story about they lost their wife to cancer and they have 3 young kids. I start crying. Like I've literally just met this person for the first time, but there's something in a story like that I can't help but just feel an immediate level of connection.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe I'm more human now,
Very
right?
interesting.
I'm less caught up in the bullshit and trying to experience the human experience more authentically.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the midst of this, you also mentioned that you were planning a wedding, which is this exciting high in your life, right? Amongst
Right?
all of this major grief and the fact that the venue canceled. Did you still feel like doing the wedding? Did you want to take a break?
Oof, well, we still wanted to. I mean, we had 65 people committed to going. We had planned it in
Oh my
Mexico.
gosh.
I didn't know this until later, but at the time when the resort called to cancel, the lady said, well, unfortunately, someone else has come in and booked the entire resort for that entire month. I didn't know this till later, but apparently the resort's not meant to contact me directly because we had gone through a travel agent. So they're the process is they're supposed to contact the travel agent. Travel agent then figures out a solution and then calls me and
Oh,
says, hey, so this is the sitch, and we go from there. But that's not what happened. So I get off the phone with the resort. I call my travel agent. She's like, oh my God, I'm so pissed. So I'm like, well, I guess the ball's in your court to work with them to figure this out because I don't have a clue what to do.
right.
This ends up sitting with the travel agent for probably another 2 months. She finally reached out to me and said, I have an amazing solution. We've gotten this amazing upgrade. So we got to go to a better resort for no additional cost. So,
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
it did work out. It was a blessing in disguise, I guess.
Yeah.
So everyone that came down, had a much better experience they may not have been able to experience without having to pay a lot more money. So it worked out great from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my
So
gosh.
the
Well,
wedding itself was wonderful. I mean, obviously
That's
there's like a
great.
bittersweet aspect to it because, you know, when my mom was getting ready to pass away, she was like, I'm really sorry. That's the one event I wish I could hang on for. But she
Mm,
knew she wouldn't live until then. So it was sort of a bittersweet time, but
right.
the wedding day itself was wonderful. Like there was no problems at all. So it was lovely.
I'm glad the wedding stuff worked out. You know, you mentioned that your mom knowing that she's not going to be able to be at your wedding. Did you do anything around that together? You mentioned a conversation, but did you do anything around that knowing that she wasn't going to be there, whether it was exchanging a gift or talking about certain things or anything like that?
We didn't. Um, and in hindsight, should we have? Maybe, but she her her experience went from I'm feeling pretty good to I'm very, very ill in a very, very quick
Mm,
period of time.
mm,
And it was one of those things where she was afraid to begin chemo, but she was such a healthy person. She didn't drink, she didn't smoke, she ate all the healthy things. She was like a yoga teacher, like she did all of the
wow.
things. And so the oncologist had said, you're likely going to respond well to aggressive chemo. So they do like an immune and a chemo kind of treatment together. And he said, based on the fact that you're so young and so healthy, we think you'll respond well. So she went for one round of chemo. And I am not someone from the medical field, but I almost feel like that one treatment sent her cancer into like overdrive because she went from not needing oxygen at all. 24 hours later, she couldn't live without oxygen on her face. Like it
Oh.
was so fast. So she was in a lot of pain, really uncomfortable, trouble to breathe. She couldn't lie down. So like it just didn't like I didn't feel it,
Yeah, oh
honestly.
god, that makes of course, that makes so much sense. Your experience, you knew that your mom was going to pass when maybe other losses are unexpected, people are not able to have conversations with each other about it, maybe things go left unsaid. What was that experience like with that knowingness?
Honestly, I don't try to dwell too much on what I could or should have said to her before she passed. I
Yeah,
think because already by that point I was in support mode. I was like, whatever you need. Do you
yeah,
need more pillows? Do you need more pain meds? Like helping her to the shower, giving her a bath, like just keeping her as comfortable as possible. Like
yeah.
I think to me that was my gift to her. That was my way
Mhm.
of like saying goodbye and giving her that love at the end.
Right, right. I know, everybody's faith is different. Some people might look at the loss of two loved ones at once thinking, this is very painful. Also, they're together. And that brings some kind of semblance of comfort, or it's totally opposite, or somewhere in the middle. What was that like for you?
That's really interesting because yes, my mom and my brother, when they were both alive, I would say had a pretty codependent relationship. Both addicts, mother son. So there is a tumultuous aspect to their relationship for sure.
Mm,
Um, and I feel like even though they couldn't have spoken before each of them passed, my sincere belief is that you know they are wherever they are, um, enjoying, what I would consider to be kind of the next level, right?
yeah,
There's
right.
like a universe out there and a sense of clarity that I feel like they're experiencing that we as humans on earth don't understand. And you don't
Hmm.
understand until you cross over. When I was off, I watched the Tyler Henry documentary on Netflix. There's like 8 episodes or
Yes.
whatever.
Seen that. Yep. Yep.
And, I'm watching because I sort of find it fascinating. And the one theme that he consistently says when he speaks with people on the other side in terms of like a medium, but
Right.
the overwhelming message they all say is that like they have the clarity, everything is at peace, like they know, they understand the universe
Yeah.
and we here don't. And so that kind of gave me some comfort that, they've obviously gotten to that place to enjoy the
Hmm.
clarity of being on the other side or whatever is the next phase, right? So that for sure gave me some like peace in that they're together hopefully with all of the the dogs and cats that we've lost over the years,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
You mentioned that humor was really important during this time. A lot of people experience a lot of guilt over having moments of joy or laughing or thinking something is funny during a time like this. Did you feel that way? I don't know. How did you grapple with that for yourself if you did experience it?
I think I just worked really hard to push that concept of guilt over being happy away. You know,
Mm.
my mom was someone who had been in active recovery from drinking for 20 some years. And she worked really hard at her own like sobriety and kind of living a better life for herself. And I think just inherently, I started to adopt a little bit of that. Life is going to continue. You need to get on and enjoy your life.
Mm.
Right. So it's almost like my mom, I could hear my mom in the background saying, like, get on with it, like, laugh, love, don't hold yourself back on my account. Cause I think for her, it was like, her saying, I got to go out on my own terms with using the MAID program and not having to prolong my own suffering or having you to watch me suffer. And so I sort of viewed it as like her gift in saying to me, like in my own head, right, that don't be afraid to laugh, don't be afraid to love. Like, you're
Wow.
getting married, you have wonderful kids, just get out there and like love your life kind of thing. So if I ever
Mhm.
was having moments of feeling guilt about being happy or enjoying something, I think I did a pretty good job at kind of stopping that guilt in its tracks and being able to say, like, she wouldn't want me to be stuck in that cycle of guilt. I think a lot of it too was her growing up. There was a lot of guilt in her own life. And so, like, how do you break that cycle of, intergenerational garbage and trauma and all that stuff,
Right,
right?
right.
And so, this is kind of my way of honoring that and saying, well, I'm not going to feel guilty for being happy or laughing at jokes or being silly. And she also knows too, like, my husband is a comedy guy. Like, he's funny, makes jokes all the time, and I can't help but laugh. And I could
Mhm.
see her just enjoying that for me.
Wow.
So,
It's amazing that your mom and some of those last moments of her life helped you kind of cope with her not being there. That's such an interesting experience of like watching her do what she did actually helps you maybe in times when you're missing her or feeling guilty about something. That's what an
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting emotional. Uh
Aw, that's
um
good. I mean, not good, but good, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. This is what the podcast is. This is what happens. Um, you mentioned there's been addiction in your family, and I'm just curious to know maybe how that's impacted your life or relationships or how you parent or anything like that, if you're willing to share about that.
Yeah, no, totally. I come from a British family, and so it goes without saying, generally drinking is part of life.
Same.
So, certainly, I probably have always been a heavier drinker. I did make the choice to stop drinking. Well, it's been over 3 years now. I had
Mm.
not been drinking for about a year before this kind of all happened. Um, and I think in some ways that was a blessing in disguise too, because I feel like had I still been drinking, I could have done a lot more damage to myself and those around me during that entire time. Right.
Yeah.
And just being able to, you know, maybe in the short term cope with some extra drinking, but then like the fallout of that, I don't think would have been good.
Yeah.
So I had actually, you know, prior to all of this, like around the time that I stopped drinking, had also been to see a naturopath. I was having some other kind of health issues, like with allergies and gut health and all that stuff. So I
Yeah.
was sort of already on kind of a journey with getting my own kind of health on track. So I think honestly that made a huge difference. I am grateful that I don't drink anymore. I mean, and no judgment because like, yeah, I've been there, done that. But I think it actually has made a huge difference in how I parent, in being more present, in being able to ride out those emotional waves as they're happening instead
Mhm.
of delaying it by numbing myself. Um, it has there been times where like it's like, yeah, I could really go for a drink right now, or fuck, that'd be good. But
Yeah.
the reality is that I think I was making those choices because maybe I saw the writing on the wall for myself down the road that it could get worse and worse and worse. And, just all the things that go with hangovers and you know,
Mhm.
the guilt that you can have from, too much to drink or any level of addiction really. Like, you maybe for yourself when it's time. I mean, I don't go to like AA or anything, but I read a couple really good books. One was called Quit Like a Woman. So that was
Mm.
pre all of this. And I think too, like knowing that my mom was practicing a sober life, and she really did struggle. And my brother obviously struggled, that, it just runs in the family. It's like, you know what? I think I'm just going to make these choices for myself so that I don't
Yeah.
go down that road.
The timing of that is just unreal, making that decision for yourself. Wow. So it's been over 2 years now. How do you feel now? What's similar? What's different? What's life like? Anything that you'd like to share?
Well, I'm definitely more in tune with keeping myself on an even keel and just trying to not let the external garbage of the world get in the
Hmm.
way of my sort of my personal harmony. And not that I was like a people pleaser all of those years before, but I think oftentimes, like as a mom, for sure, you tend to put your own crap or your own needs at the bottom. It's always
Mm.
everyone else first. And so I've just kind of gotten a lot better at keeping myself higher on that list to say, I don't want to turn around and not handle life. So I need to, to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do for myself so I
Right.
can get out there, whether that's with the kids or work or house, whatever. It doesn't even matter. My dad, anything, right?
Hmm.
So just making myself more a priority for sure has been huge. Everything else sort of kind of falls into place when I know that I can feel centered. And that might look different each day, right? Like some days it's I need a nap. Some days it's I'm going to go out for a run or go hang out in the garden or I need to get this report done. Like just ensuring that I'm not leaving myself out to dry because I know if my wick gets too short, there's far reaching more like consequences for the people around me if I can't be my best.
Right. I'm so glad that you're prioritizing yourself, your needs, your health, because I think it would be really easy for somebody to experience this and go kind of the other direction of like, what's the point
Right?
of anything? Right. And really get kind of pulled into the darkness.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be a really powerful message for people and a really hopeful message. You've already mentioned some books and podcasts and things that helped you heal or process things. Are there any other like tools, movies, songs, anything else that comes to mind that you kept turning to or really helped you through all of this?
Well, I do love a good trash reality show on Netflix. So
Oh,
like
yes. Yes, please list the ones that you like.
like the Selling Sunsets and stuff like
Oh,
that.
oh, mwah, chef's
I
kiss.
can't
Yes.
yeah, I can't help but just like get into it. And actually,
Yes.
my husband and his stepdaughter, they're big like bachelor fans, and
Yep.
they've kind of got me on the train. So now we do drafts, we pick our favorites for the season and we
Yeah.
get right into it. So, these like sort of fun little, guilty pleasures or whatever,
Right.
something to look forward to every week or each day or once a month, just I think those are parts of that human experience is having things to look forward to, regardless of how silly they are.
Right.
Otherwise, if everything is so serious and dark and that's heavy, and
Yeah.
there's so much heavy
Yeah.
shit going on in everyone's life, like taking the opportunity to enjoy the small fun things, I think makes a huge difference.
Oh,
So,
yes. Oh my gosh. This is so interesting that you're bringing this up because what an interesting way to kind of look at the grieving process, too, is like sometimes, if you've just experienced a loss, those trivial things might bug the shit out of you, thinking about them, talking about them, whatever. And then at some point, you kind of need those little trivial, guilty pleasures to infuse joy into your life or, take a little escape or something. Isn't that weird? How
yeah,
those things, like even the relationship with those things can change throughout how you might be
totally.
feeling.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Let's say that somebody is tuning in right now and they are kind of amidst a period of time like this where they're experiencing a lot at once and maybe they feel like things are falling apart. They don't know really where to go from here. They may be fearful about the future. They don't know how they might get out of this. They're not seeing any of that light yet. Is there anything that you would like to tell somebody who might be feeling that way, just kind of knowing what you've been through and what may have helped you at that time?
I think talking about things is probably paramount. If you
Yeah.
have the ability or have the funds or access to therapy, I can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah.
honestly. If you're able to do it in a professional capacity, or even if there's just someone in your community, friend, family, acquaintance, someone that just is willing to lend a shoulder or an ear. Because it's one of those things where being able to verbalize the thoughts and emotions you're having, it's so cliche, but like it gets it off your chest and you do feel that weight lift. You do
Yeah.
feel better when you can say things out loud, because I think part of like my darkness was not being able to trust my own thoughts. You kind of have to work through a process of learning how to challenge your own thoughts that are kind of passing through your brain. Like, well, that's not real. Being able to challenge that, but you want to be able to say those things out loud, because if you just stay up in your head the whole time, like, I don't know, you probably drive yourself crazy.
Right.
Um, Again, God bless my husband for listening to all of the garbage I would say out loud, but just having a safe space if you can't have access to therapy, honestly, I think makes the number one difference.
Absolutely. Are there certain times now, 2 plus years later, where it takes you off guard that you might be like feel a wave of grief? Certain things that you notice like, wow, didn't expect that to happen, whatever at the middle of the grocery aisle or whatever. Anything like that from this
Oh
stuff.
yeah, I still have moments where I'm like, I can't believe I fucking went through all that. I'm still going
Yeah.
through it, right? Like I
Yeah.
sometimes there's still like that shock value that I play out in my own head. Like, you spent time talking to the coroner. That's so weird. So sometimes that shock still gives me waves.
Yeah.
And then other times it's just missing my mom, right? Like, no one can replace the mom in your life that you could call to, I can't wait to tell you about this, or she sends you funny dog videos. Like, there's just all those little things that aren't there. So sometimes, like, I could be watching a funny video on TikTok or Instagram, and then something slightly emotional comes on there and I'm just basket of tears.
Mhm.
But I think that's okay. There was that guy who did that interview with Jimmy Fallon, and he talked about grief as being all of the love that you can't give them anymore.
Oh,
And so he never
wow.
wanted to lose the grief because it was like really love driven. And so when I'm having those like sad moments of missing my mom or my brother, or just like, oh my God, I just remember that it comes from a place of love, or I try to. Not always successful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just like, poor me. But it's okay to have a pity party once in a while. Just be
Yeah. Oh
like,
my god, you need one every once in a while.
just allowing it to happen, I think too, is kind of part of that.
What a way to look at it. You're really full of love in that moment, even though it feels like shit. Yes. You know what was really interesting? We had an episode about grief a while back, and it was really interesting to learn about how the stages of grief, the 5 stages, were actually that was developed for people who were in hospice at the end of their life. And those were kind of the stages they went through, maybe in that order, maybe not, but that does not apply to all grief. And that the stages for most people, there's not really stages, they're not in order, and they just are there forever. There's not this neat little process of how to grieve. And I was like, wow, I feel like more people need to know that. I didn't realize that the 5 stages of grief were kind of developed in that very kind of isolated environment for this kind of
Mm,
one specific thing. And I think it's just helpful for people to know that it's okay if, 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years down the road, you're still experiencing grief around the loss of loved ones or whatever it is. That makes sense,
totally.
and that's normal, and you're not abnormal if you're still feeling that way.
Absolutely.
Are there any, I don't know, intentions for your future or goals that you have that weren't there before experiencing all of this? Or is it like, I don't have any goals because you got to be in the present? I mean, I'm just so curious to know, as a very type A person, how that may have, shifted things for you in that department.
That's a good question. I think in many cases, my ability to hold compassion has increased. And so, from a maybe not from a goal setting perspective, but just like how I approach kind of any situation, whether I'm interacting with people in like a professional capacity, I might have now shifted into slightly more like human approach, versus it being like numbers or spreadsheets or whatever it is that we're dealing with. Goals, that's a tricky one because I do feel like my kids are at an age where I feel like I'm still a little bit in limbo, because they're at an age where they are too. Like, they're in their young 20s, right? So you're
Mm.
like, I'm trying to be there to support letting their wings fly and stuff. So, my goals are more around making sure I get a couple of trips every year.
Right, right. Makes
And things like
sense.
just to kind
Yeah.
of be able to enjoy life would be my goal.
Mhm.
just to make sure you're enjoying it. Because if you're not, that sucks.
Yeah.
I don't want to say what's the point because that sounds really dark, but the realization is that we only have one shot. Like we are only
Mhm.
here one time. And if we're all stressed out and we're all full of anxiety, we're all full of depression, that's shitty. And I don't want that
Mhm.
for myself. I don't want that for my kids or anyone around me that I can help. That,
Yeah.
take more joy. That's the goal. There, that's the goal is to take more joy.
Yes. You had mentioned that you felt like you went back to work maybe a little too soon or something like that. What was that transition like back into that kind of day-to-day?
Yeah, I think it probably was a bit early, but I think I was feeling guilty.
Mm,
Honestly, because in many respects I was feeling better. I thought, well, I guess that means I should go back to work now, right? Instead of just being like, it's okay to just be okay for a bit longer, is it not? No, better get back
right.
to being productive and get back there. So that was a weird sort of guilt-driven decision to go back so soon. And I think I wasn't angry with myself, but I was frustrated because there I was pretending that everything was fine. And people I felt, and maybe they were, they weren't, but I felt, there was people kind of looking at you when you walk by, like, oh, how is she doing? Right? She had a nervous breakdown and took time off work. And, you know, again, that's probably in my own head. But then at the same time, I was like, fuck you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I'm back. What do you got to say about that?
Right, right, right.
So I had this like back and forth argument all the time of like, I don't want to be here. I'm still super sad all of the time to being pretending and like, you know, giving the old bird to everyone to be like, don't look at me like that. So it was this like weird
Yeah.
scenario where I was trying to reconcile that transition. Um, and, it took me a while because there were some people I worked with that were super supportive and like, how are you doing? And glad to have you back. We've missed you. And other people that avoid you, like you're going to give them the plague or something, right? At the end of the day, that transition was tough, but I came out kind of feeling like, again, I'm not going to put up with crap like that window of tolerance for other people's, judgment or,
Yeah.
their lack of compassion. I just had to choose to not engage with those people and just do what I could do.
Mhm. Some people have shared experiences around, the loss of a loved one or, tragedy in their life where they are surprised by how the people in their life react to that, where maybe they expected to hear from people more than they did, or maybe the people that were surprisingly really there for them that they weren't expecting to be, because death makes people uncomfortable. They don't know what to say, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to help. Did you experience any of that? And if so, what was really helpful and maybe what wasn't so helpful for you during that time?
It's interesting because I was really close with my mom and a lot of her, I don't want to say friend groups, but like for lack of better words, they had in the early days after she passed away, they were sort of reaching out quite a bit. And it almost felt like they were trying to engage with me to become kind of a replacement, like to take
Mm,
her shoes or to take her spot in, maybe in the yoga class on a Sunday or, join some of the groups that she was in. And
yeah.
it wasn't that anyone said it outright, but there was this sort of, I was a connection for them to her,
Oh, wow.
right? So I
Interesting.
felt like there was this, Stephanie, come talk with us and be a part of this. And it felt weird for me because they weren't my people,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
then eventually that sort of, tapered off and, it's not like that now. Every once in a while, like some of her friends might reach out and say, how are you doing? And how's your dad? Because there's just the two of us now. So, people do reach out a little bit. Surprisingly, though, um, anybody that had been a part of sort of our lives during that time or even before, I really don't hear from. And that's okay. Honestly, like I don't hold any negativity towards that because I think maybe if I was such a reminder of her that maybe they find it too difficult to be in contact with me,
Mm,
right?
yeah. Right.
It's still too hard for them that I always say, oh, you look so much like your mom and you guys have same mannerisms, right? So there could be a lot of that that's hard for them to be in touch with me for. So,
Right.
let let people do what they need or want in that respect. I don't hold anybody negatively for that because we all have to, again, we all process that grief a little bit different.
Absolutely. Did you notice any different ways people were grieving within your own family? Was that displayed in certain ways of how people were coping?
I think for the most part, people just don't want to talk about it. And, that could have been my kids, my dad, friends. It's like people don't want to talk about it or they don't know how to bring it up or they don't want to say, how are you doing? I'm not doing very well. Or, like people just don't know what to say. So enters the room inappropriate humor.
Sure.
Right? So now we're making really bad, untasteful jokes about anything death related. But I think from that, we've also, in my inner circle, is now we can talk about my mom in a way that's okay for everyone. Right? Like
Mm,
if we're talking about the way I cooked the spaghetti, it's like, oh, well, Wendy would have done it this way, or, cheers to Wendy, this tastes just like hers, or, just things like that, where you can sort of bring her into the conversation and it not be weird and people not feel awkward to engage in talking about her.
right.
So that's kind of
Right.
nice.
Does your family celebrate your loved ones, or like, some people do certain things around anniversaries, birthdays, just anything like that, certain family activities or traditions, anything like that pop up for you guys?
Being British, like Sunday family dinner was always a big one, good, bad, or otherwise. Some people are like, oh, the Sunday dinners, good Lord. So we don't specifically do a Sunday dinner anymore, but if I have everyone over, I might try to make one of my mom's, famous meals, right? Or try
Sure.
to, or sort of
Right.
her signature dishes. And that's kind of a way of bringing everyone in together to celebrate her, is
Yeah.
with, because that was one thing my mom was great at. She would want everyone to come over and cook these beautiful, wonderful meals. And she was a great cook, right? So, what a great way to kind of honor her is that if we do have a big family dinner, especially on a Sunday,
Yeah.
we would do that.
That's lovely. Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing everything that you did. Do you have anything else that you want to leave people with something? And then also, if you're comfortable, where might people find you if they want to just let you know that they really appreciated your episode, or maybe ask you a question about a resource or something like that?
Certainly, like my Instagram handle, people could message me. It's
Awesome.
Steph at Steph. I'm not on social media so much anymore. Just
Yeah.
I'm busy living life instead of posting about it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just me
Makes
personal.
sense. Yeah. I feel you.
But yeah, I mean, I think anything like that I've said here, um, is just hoping that people enjoy life and find joy and do what makes you happy and just look for those things because when you go through lots of trauma and dark and stuff like that, it can be hard to find that kind of light again. And so my hope is that for anyone listening or who've experienced anything like that, that you can just look for that light again because that's all we have.
Amen
Yeah.
to that. Big thank you to Stephanie for being on the podcast today and sharing so openly with us. If you want to send her some love about her episode, you can message her on Instagram at FloTaSteph. That's FLOTASTEPH. And then wrapping up with a quick announcement and the Apple Podcast review of the episode. So, if you want to be the first to hear when we do this subscriber stories series again, you can join the Self Helpless email list at selfhelplesspodcast.com. It's called the Self Help List. And you also get a bunch of juicy quotes as a welcome gift when you sign up. It's completely free, but our email list subscribers are the first people to hear about these kinds of things and opportunities to be featured on the podcast. So, selfhelplesspodcast.com for that. And then the Apple Podcast review today is from MLE000. It says, amazing. Self-Helpless is such a blessing. I love listening to these ladies create a safe space, keep it real, and have fun while they do it. Kelsey, Delanie, and Taylor are hilarious and make talking about mental health easier. A guaranteed way for me to improve my mood and day. This is so sweet. Thank you, MLE. I'm so glad that tuning into Self-Helpless improves your days and your mood. I mean, that's just one of the best things we could ask for. So thank you for sharing that. And sounds like MLE is going through some past episodes. So if you want to check out some of our older episodes of the podcast, I mean, depending on what you stumble upon, there will either be 3 hosts, 2 hosts, or 1 host. I mean, we have a variety for you all, just a little something for everybody. And I'm still shocked when people write in and say that they recently discovered the podcast for the first time and they decided to start from episode 1 and binge every episode to the present in just a few weeks. I mean, I think we have almost 400 episodes now. So there's definitely a lot to sift through and go through. And if you're somebody that just likes having podcasts on in the background while you work or, do dishes or whatever it is, I am definitely one of those people. I love listening to podcasts while I'm doing chores around the house or going on a walk, whatever it might be. And this actually reminds me, we get so many great suggestions from you all about topics that we should cover on the podcast. But also, just a heads up, I would say that about a solid 40% of suggestions that we get are topics that we've already covered. And of course, we could always go into more detail on any topic and discuss it from several different angles and points of view. However, if you search in your podcast app, Self-Helpless, and then the buzzword of the topic that you're looking for, it should pop up that way. You can also search for it on YouTube, or our website has a little search engine. But just wanted to let you know, because if you do that, you might not have to wait for your topic to be covered, which can take months sometimes, just depending on where we're at with episodes. So the topic that you're looking for might already be waiting for you. I just recommend taking a little peek because, like I said, we do have 400 episodes or something like that now, so it can be easily missed. And if you want to leave a review like MLE000 did, you can do so on your Apple Podcast app, and I'll get to say hi to you on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in to Self-Helpless. You can find our brand new merch, Patreon community, and other fun goodies at selfhelplesspodcast.com. We'd be thrilled if you left an Apple Podcast review, shared this episode with a friend, or post about it on Instagram and tag us at Self-Helpless Podcast so we could repost you and say hi. As an independently produced show, we sincerely appreciate your support. Thanks, everybody.